Good morning,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning,
And
ma'am.
Good
yes,
morning, ma'am.
what about the
Good morning,
slide
ma'am.
visibility? Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Good
busy,
morning,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. The
I think
slides are
half of the
visible.
section with me is for tutorial as well. In fact, I took a tutorial class yesterday with D2. Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
and as I said, I did not have much to discuss yesterday. So today I will be starting with Unit 3 of your syllabus in chemistry, that is water chemistry. And as you can see on the slide, this Unit 3 water chemistry will be taught to you by me, that is Dr. Ruchi Chawla, and I in combination with Dr. Aarti Chauhan. Right now we both are working as DST women scientists in the Department of Chemistry in IIT Allahabad, and we will be teaching you water chemistry for this semester in chemistry theory class. What is the status of the syllabus? Have you all downloaded the syllabus of all the subjects
Yes,
including
ma'am.
chemistry? Yes? Okay, so the ones who have not done it, please download the syllabus. It is available on the institute's website, so you can download the syllabus from there. But for your information, I have included the syllabus here in the second slide. So as you can see, in all, you have to study 6 units in chemistry. As per the structure of the syllabus, you will be taught 3 units by 3 different faculty members or instructors in a week. So have you had the other 2 lectures till now of chemistry?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay. So one lecture which should have been by I think Professor P.K. Datta, he must have started with polymers, and the other lecture must have been by Dr. Tamal Ghosh, who is also right now the head of the department. He must have started with lubricants. And today I will start with water chemistry. So initially you will be learning about Unit 2, Unit 3 and Unit 6. Once these units are complete, the other faculty members or instructors, they will take over and they will be teaching you chemical bonding, polymers and corrosion. Focusing on water chemistry, what I have to take with you, though the subunits are not very descriptive, but still you can have an idea. I will be teaching you sources and nature of impurities and characteristics of natural water. And after 3 lectures, I will be followed by Dr. Aarti Chauhan, who will be teaching you water treatment processes and municipal supplied water. Talking about the reference book, there are 3 books which have been prescribed in the syllabus as well. You can follow Engineering Chemistry by Jain and Jain, or Engineering Chemistry by Shashi Chawla, or Engineering Chemistry by Dara and Rumair. The students in the previous semester told me that Jain and Jain is available online. You can even look up in the institute's online library for the availability of these books. But at least one book you should have in hard copy with you for reference. Though everything will be taken up in the classroom, but definitely you should have these books with you, one of the books at least, and the others can be treated as reference books. If you will take my suggestion, I find Jain and Jain more descriptive. That can help you prepare for the comparative exams as well, for which you must be targeting after your BTech course is complete. And more direct treatment is given in Shashi Chawla. So if you're targeting only on BTech, then Shashi Chawla can also be a choice. these are the 3 books. Dara and Umair can be used as a reference book online. So for the complete syllabus of chemistry, these 3 books can be referred to. Now starting with the content, is slide number 4 visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have included the slide just to make you understand why water chemistry is being taught to you, means BTech students at this level. So I know many of you straight away go into industry after BTech. If not after BTech, then some of you pursue higher studies, MTech, and then after that you enter industry. So because after this course you will be joining the industries for work, one needs to really understand that there is a very strong relationship between water and industry. Why? Because water is used in a number of industries. For example, the textile industry, the laundry industry, paper, sugar, beverages, boilers which are used for steam generation. At the industrial level, boilers are used for steam generation, and that steam in turn is used for the generation of electricity. So water finds use in these number of industries, and the water that is used in these industries, it is the use of the water that decides what definite specification it should have. So it is the use of water which decides the specification of the water. Now you can understand the second point more easily with the help of examples. I have tried to incorporate 2 examples. For example, if we talk about boilers, what are boilers? Boilers are nothing but big vessels which are used at the industrial level to boil water at a large scale for the purpose of steam generation, and the steam that is generated, definitely that is used for the generation of electricity. I hope you all are familiar with the process. So the water that is fed into these boilers, what should be the specification? The specification should be that it should be free from certain dissolved salts. This is the specification. So the use of water for steam generation in boilers. And what is the specification? The specification should be that it should be free from certain dissolved salts. Why it should be free from certain dissolved salts? Because if these salts will be present, then it can lead to the formation of scales. Scales is a technical term about which you will be taught in detail by Dr. Aarti Chauhan when you will be studying boiler troubles. So these salts, dissolved salts, they can lead to scale formation on the inner layer of boilers, which can prevent efficient heat transfer. Now, just to give you an idea of what scales are, you must have all boiled water in the kitchen in utensils, and you must have noticed that when water boils at the surface, in the inner walls of the boiler, white deposits can be seen. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
So
Yes,
just
ma'am.
imagine if that boiling process goes again and again, on and on. It is continued, and this deposition also goes on and on with time. So what happens? These white deposits of the dissolved salts, they become hard, and these hard deposits, they are known as scales. Okay. So the scales have formed in the inner layer of boilers. What will happen? For boiling the same amount of water, you will have to supply more of heat energy, because these scales will be absorbing a part of the heat energy that you will supply, and this will make the process less efficient. So this was one example. Suppose you take another example of the beverage industry. Beverages include the cold drinks that you consume, or even the juices. So the water that is used for the beverage industry, that should not be alkaline. This is a specification. It should not be alkaline, because if the water will be alkaline, what will happen? It will either destroy or it will modify the taste of the beverage by neutralizing the fruit acids. Fruit acids are used for the nutrition value content as well as for the taste. So since these are acids, the fruit component which is added, it is acidic in nature. So this acid will react with the alkaline component of water and taste will be destroyed. And if the taste is destroyed, the whole purpose of the beverage industry, the cold drinks mostly are consumed for taste. So if the taste is destroyed, the whole purpose will fail. So with the help of these two examples, I have tried to explain how the use of the water, what use the water will be put to, that decides at the industrial level, that decides what should be the specification of that water. Is it clear to everyone? The second point especially.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you are curious enough, then you can refer to the textbooks and you can even look up into these examples, the textile industry, the laundry industry, what should be the specification of water that is used at these levels, industrial levels. I cannot take up all the examples in the class because time does not permit it. But if you are interested, you can refer to the textbooks and you will find the specifications for all these industries that is required for the water that is supplied to that industry. Yeah. So this was the relationship between water and industry and why this topic is being taught to you at this level. Now coming to the sources of water, the water which is supplied to the industry. Now you're all familiar with this, and since it is there in the syllabus and I need to build up the topic, that is why I have included this on the slide. Slide number 5, is it visible? So quickly I will
Yes,
go,
ma'am.
I will be going through it. The chief sources of water, broadly they fall into three categories. It can be either the rainwater, which is the purest form of natural water, or it can be surface water, which again can be divided into still waters, which include ponds and lakes. And second category of surface water is flowing water, which includes the streams, rivers, seas, and oceans. And the third class or the source of water is the underground water. The rainwater, when it falls on the earth's surface, it percolates the surface and it goes down, and in the journey it picks up a number of salts until it meets a hard rock. The water gets deposited over there. That water is known as underground water, and it may emerge in the form of a spring or in the form of a well. So water from this source can also be supplied to the industry. So I think not much has to be discussed about these sources. You already know about it. Now coming to the impurities that can be present in these sources of water, or the water that is drawn from these sources. It contains a number of impurities, and if you will refer to the books, a number of classifications have been given. I have picked one of them, the one that I found most suitable. These impurities can be classified into three categories: physical impurities, the chemical impurities, and the biological impurities or microorganisms. By biological impurity, we mean the living impurities, and they will include the microorganisms. So let us take up these impurities one by one. Coming to the physical impurities first. Physical impurities include clay, sand, decayed vegetable and animal matter. And it is going to be the size of the particle of these impurities that will decide whether it is a suspended form of impurity or a colloidal form of impurity. If the particle size is big enough that it settles down with time, then you will call it suspended impurity. And what is the effect of it? It will make the water turbid. Suspended impurities are present. It will make the water turbid. That means you will not be able to see through it completely. Otherwise, if these impurities are not present, water is transparent. You can see through it. But if the size of the particle is small enough, that is, it is finely divided, then in that case, the impurities do not settle with time and they are known as colloidal impurities, and they can impart color, odor and taste to water. In fact, the suspended impurities can also impart odor and taste, but color is specific for this colloidal type of impurity. Now coming to the chemical impurities. Is slide number 8 visible to everyone? Is it visible, slide number 8?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now the chemical impurities, they can be broadly divided into the dissolved salts and the dissolved gases. Firstly, talking about the dissolved salts, they can be the chlorides, sulfates, bicarbonates and carbonates of calcium, magnesium, sodium, iron, or even manganese. There can be a number of metals. And since we are saying dissolved, that is why it becomes important which anion we're talking about. So the chlorides and sulfates, for all the metal ions except a few, they are soluble in water. So even the bicarbonates and carbonates of some, they are soluble in water. So we are only talking about the dissolved salts. What effect can it produce? If the chlorides, sulfates and bicarbonates of calcium and magnesium are present, then they can make the water hard. This can be one effect. In fact, hardness is a technical term about which we will be discussing in detail. It is a characteristic of water, and I will be teaching you about it in detail in the coming classes. If the salts are bicarbonates and carbonates of calcium and sodium, magnesium, then it can make the water alkaline as well as hard. Again, alkalinity is a technical term, and about this I will be teaching you in detail. In fact, I will start with alkalinity today itself in the coming slides. Coming to the dissolved gases, the dissolved gases can be oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and if oxygen is present, then it can accelerate the rate of corrosion. Now, this statement has been given with respect to the boiler. And the most common example of corrosion is rusting. You're all familiar with it? And you know, oxygen is an essential condition for rusting to take place. So if oxygen is present, then it can lead to the corrosion of boilers. Similarly, if acidic gases like carbon dioxide and H2O are present, then they can make the water acidic, which in turn can corrode the inner walls of the boilers. Is that clear? Was anyone asking something? Okay, no. So this was about the chemical impurities, and we will be focusing more on them. And finally, coming to the biological impurities or the microorganisms, they include bacteria, fungi and algae, and if they are present, they can lead to the spread of various diseases like typhoid, dysentery, hepatitis. So the removal of these impurities become really important when you're talking about the use of water at the domestic level, or say for drinking purposes. So if you have to drink that water, then definitely these disease causing microorganisms, they need to be removed from the water, and this removal is done with the help of a process known as disinfection. Disinfection is done at the municipal corporation level, and then the water is supplied to the homes. Do you know which chemical is used at the municipal level for the disinfection of water?
And calcium hypochlorite.
And it leads to the formation of what? Ultimately. It produces nascent chlorine, which is the chlorine gas actually, which is used for the disinfection. And the concentration is really important. Lower doses can be harmful, even higher doses can be harmful. So the appropriate concentration is decided with the help of a curve known as breakpoint chlorination curve. Again, you have to study in detail about this curve and this process of breakpoint chlorination, and this will be taught to you in detail by Dr. Aarti Chauhan, probably in the concluding lecture of water chemistry. And do not get puzzled when I'm talking about the technical terms. I'm just making you familiar with them or introducing them to you so that you know what you have to study in water chemistry throughout. But you will be taught about them in detail, so do not get panicked with these technical terms. And finally, coming to slide number 10, is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I have included this slide to make
Yes,
you
ma'am.
familiar with the complete syllabus of water chemistry. In fact, what you have to study in water chemistry. So basically, you have to study about water treatment and what are water treatment methods. So what are water treatment methods? Right now, I have told you about the various sources of natural water which are used at the industrial level. Now I have said the natural water contains impurities, and these impurities make it unfit for use at the industrial level as well as for domestic purposes. So what is our goal as chemists or engineers? Our goal is to convert this natural water into water which is fit for domestic and industrial purposes. And for that, we employ a number of methods, and those methods are known as water treatment methods. The methods that you employ for the conversion of natural water unfit for use containing impurities into water which is fit for use at the domestic and industrial level. And these methods can be broadly divided into three categories. The ones you have to study, I'm only talking about them. So these methods can be the internal treatment methods, the external treatment methods, and finally disinfection. About disinfection, I have told you on the previous slide what is disinfection. In fact, this is basically done for the conversion of water for use at the domestic level. And these terms, internal and external treatment, they are employed with respect to boiler. Boiler chemistry you have to study in detail. What are the boiler troubles? What are the sources? How can they be removed? And these methods are employed for the treatment of water that is fed into the boilers. And these two terms, internal and external, they have been used with respect to boiler. If the treatment is being done inside the boiler, then the method will be known as internal treatment method, and it will include phosphate conditioning, carbonate conditioning, colloidal conditioning, and so on. So you have to study about these methods. And what about the term external? The term external signifies that the treatment is taking place before the water has entered into the boiler. So the treatment is taking place outside the boiler. So if it is outside the boiler, then it is known as external treatment method. And in this category, you have to learn three types of methods. The first one is lime and soda. Lime and soda is really important. You have to learn the principle, and you will even be made to solve numerical problems on it. So lime and soda is really important. After lime and soda, you have to study about the zeolite method, and finally the ion exchange method. So in this category, 3 methods you have to learn. So this was about your complete syllabus of chemistry, water chemistry. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now starting with what I have to teach you in your water chemistry class. So we will be now onwards focusing on water quality parameters or the characteristics of water. These water quality parameters, they can be divided into 2 categories, the physical parameters and the chemical parameters. In the physical parameter category, you can talk about the color, turbidity, taste and odor, and total dissolved salts concentration in water. Whereas the chemical parameters include hardness, alkalinity, pH, biological oxygen demand, and chemical oxygen demand. About the physical parameters, I have hinted on the slide when we talked about the physical impurities. And when we were discussing the chemical impurities, I hinted about these 2 parameters, hardness and alkalinity. Now, if you are interested, you can go into the detail of all the other parameters. But in the class, I will be only talking about these 2 parameters, hardness and alkalinity. And if you have gone through the list of your experiments that you have to learn in your practical class, chemistry practical class, you must have noticed that you have 3 experiments based on these 2 characteristics in the volumetric category. So when you will start with water chemistry experiments, the first 2 experiments you have to learn on alkalinity, and then after that an experiment on hardness. So since you have to learn first experiment on alkalinity in water chemistry in your practical class, I will be starting with alkalinity today. So I will be discussing only important quality parameters or characteristics of water, and the first in that category is alkalinity. Now this term alkalinity has originated definitely from the term alkalis. Now will anyone define what are alkalis?
Bases which can be dissolved in water.
Water soluble bases, yes. Water soluble bases are known as alkalis. So ultimately all alkalis are bases. So if we talk about this property of alkalis, if they are bases, how will they behave when they will come in contact with acids? Or which reaction will they undergo? Bases reacting with acids. Which reaction will they undergo?
Neutralization
reaction.
Neutralization reaction, yes. So if you know this characteristic of alkalis, with the help of this information, you can very well frame the definition of alkalinity. What is alkalinity? It is a characteristic of water which is a measure of its acid neutralizing ability. So alkalinity is nothing but a measure of the acid neutralizing ability of any water sample. Now, if we talk about the alkalinity of any sample of water, it is observed that generally this alkalinity component is due to the presence of only 3 ions. And what are those 3 ions? The hydroxide ions, the carbonate ions, and the bicarbonate ion. Now what I want is, do not look on the slide, and in your notebooks I want you to write the formula of these three ions in three different lines. In the first line, write the formula of hydroxide ion. In the second line, carbonate ion. And in the third line, bicarbonate ion. Do it right now. Write the formula of these three ions: hydroxide, carbonate, and bicarbonate. Done.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Now we have to talk about the acid neutralizing ability of these ions. So, what are acids according to the Arrhenius concept? What are acids according to the Arrhenius concept?
Which loses H plus
Ma'am,
ions.
anything which releases H plus ions in the water.
H plus, it should be hydronium ion specifically. The substances which can produce hydronium ion in water. Now leave
Okay,
that
H3O
hydrogen, leave that water molecule, so you will be left with H plus only. Yes. So write down the reaction of these three ions with H plus. All the three ions that we have written, write down the reaction of these three ions with H plus. And once you are done, compare the result that is there on the screen. I think most of you must have got the answers correctly. OH minus will react with H plus to form water. Carbonate H plus will form bicarbonate ion. And it may happen that in the third case, many of you have written carbonic acid H2CO3, but that is not a stable acid and it gets dissociated into H2O and CO2. So we will write the final products H2O and CO2. You can dissociate the carbonic acid into H2O and CO2. And these are balanced reactions. And in a balanced reaction, you need to balance the number of atoms of each element on both the sides of the arrow. But since these are ionic reactions as well, always remember that charges are also conserved in ionic reactions. So suppose in the second reaction, if it is 2 minus and H plus, then it should be -1 on the right hand side. So remember that charges are also conserved. Now one more important thing. If I write in the second reaction 2H plus in case of carbonate, then tell me what will be the final product.
H2O plus.
H2O plus CO2. That means if we talk about the complete neutralization of carbonate, then 1 mole of carbonate ions will be requiring 2 moles of H plus, and ultimately the products will be H2O and CO2. Or you can say that the neutralization of carbonate is a two-step reaction. In the first step, bicarbonate ions are formed, which take up more of H plus and get converted into H2O and CO2. So among the three ions, the first and third, remember the sequence as well. This will help you with things. So the first hydroxide and the third bicarbonate, these two ions for complete neutralization, they require only 1 mole of H plus for 1 mole of these ions, and it is a single step reaction. Whereas complete neutralization of carbonate requires 2H plus or 2 moles of H plus for 1 mole of carbonate and the products are finally H2O and CO2. So it is a two-step reaction, and the one that you can see on the screen right now, this is the partial neutralization of carbonate up to bicarbonate only. Is it clear? I will be repeating this when we will be discussing the estimation of alkalinity. I will be repeating this. So keep in mind that neutralization of carbonate is a two-step reaction. Now, these are just pieces of information. What about the unit of alkalinity? It is generally expressed in ppm, parts per million of calcium carbonate equivalents. And I will be discussing this unit, ppm, of calcium carbonate equivalents in detail when I will be discussing the units in hardness. It is going to be the same unit over there, so that is why I am not discussing it today. But yes, 1 ppm means what? 1 part per 10 to the power 6 parts. 1 million is 10 lakhs, so that is 10 to the power 6. So why do you think are we using this unit ppm in the case of alkalinity and not any other, say, common unit, gram per liter? Concentration is also expressed most commonly in gram per liter. So why are we not using that? Why such a small unit? 1 upon 10 to the power 6. Why do you think such a small unit is being used here in this case?
Because topic amount.
Yes, because the concentration is really small. So that is why we are using such a small unit. And the second piece of information is that how is this alkalinity introduced in the water? So other than the salts that are dissolved, apart from that, it is the metallurgical industries, chemical industries, and the drainage from abandoned mines, which leads to alkalinity in natural water. So the pollutants from these industries, they also make the alkaline component of natural water higher.
Ma'am.
Yes. Let me complete with this slide, and after this I will wind up, then maybe you can ask the question if you have some doubt in your mind. Now coming to the types of alkalinity. For this I want to ask you one question. I told you alkalinity is due to the presence of primarily 3 ions, 3 basic ions. Now on the basis of this information, if I ask you, tell me theoretically how many combinations can you form with the help of these 3 ions? All the type. Apply all the permutation and combination you know, and tell me how many combinations can you form from these 3 ions? I'm not audible. Am I?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Ma'am, you are audible.
6 combinations,
Yes, ma'am.
I think your mic is not working or your connectivity is low. Who was this complaining? Check your connectivity. Okay, yes, somebody was saying 6. How many possible combinations with the help of 3 ions? No, 6 is the wrong answer.
3.
7.
3, ma'am.
No, wrong. No.
7.
Yes, somebody said 7.
Ma'am, 7.
7, ma'am. 7.
7 is the right answer. Yes, 7 is the right answer. How 7? Think about the individual ions. Then hydroxide only, carbonate only, bicarbonate only, 3 possibilities. Then think about the combinations. First and second together, hydroxide, carbonate. Second and third together, carbonate and bicarbonate. And first and third together, that is hydroxide and bicarbonate. So 3 more combinations, that means a total of 6. What about the 7th combination?
Ma'am, all
Together.
Ma'am, all three.
All the 3 together.
All
That is
together.
only one combination. But as you can see on the slide, I have displayed only five types. That means out of the 7, we rule out 2. And why does that happen? Because practically it is observed that you come across only 5 combinations practically. Why does that happen, or which conditions have we ruled out? Think about the first and third ion. That is the reaction of hydroxide and bicarbonate. Try to write the reaction in your copies. Reaction of hydroxide and bicarbonate.
Yes, ma'am, it is not feasible.
So bicarbonate contain an acidic H plus and OH minus, they will form water, and you will be left with carbonate. Charges should be conserved, so it should be a -2 on the right hand side as well. So are you satisfied with this reaction? So what is happening? When you will talk about this dual combination, hydroxide and carbonate, means the first and third together, what will happen? These ions, they will react together, and what will the condition reduce to? Among these 5, which situation is this? Among the 5 that are there on the slide, tell me which condition is this? Carbonate plus H2O. Yes?
Carbonate only.
Carbonate only, yes, the second condition, carbonate only. So this is nothing new. If hydroxide and bicarbonate will be present, they will be reacting with each other and it will reduce to carbonate only. So that is why you rule out this combination, because this is nothing but carbonate only. Other than this, if you talk about all the 3 ions existing together, in this case, what will happen? Again, hydroxide and bicarbonate will react, and ultimately you will be left with carbonate and water only. Are you clear with the reaction?
No.
Only the first
Yes,
and
ma'am.
second are reacting here, and then the products are being added to this carbonate. So again, in this condition also, it is nothing new, and this is nothing but second condition, carbonate only. So these 2 conditions are ruled out, and this reasoning is often asked in the viva of your chemistry practical exams. So remember this, it's important. And when you rule out these 2 conditions, you are only left with the 5 types of alkalinity that one can come across in any sample of water. So the 5 cases are hydroxide only, carbonate only, bicarbonate only. Then when you come to the combinations of 2, both hydroxide and carbonate, and both carbonate and bicarbonate. Now how will you remember this? Which 2 combinations? Without thinking about this reaction, how can you remember the 2 combinations? For this, you only need to keep one thing in mind, that the middle ion, carbonate, is present in both of them. Are you observing that carbonate is present in both of them? So when you will write the 5 types of alkalinity, list the individual cases, and after that you will think about carbonate, and you will make the combination of carbonate with the remaining 2 ions. That means carbonate with the first ion, hydroxide, and carbonate with the third ion, that is carbonate and bicarbonate. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So with this now, I think I can stop today. Do you have a class after this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
But I will give you a glimpse of what we have to start with on the next turn. On the next turn, we will start with the estimation of alkalinity. It is going to be nothing but an acid-base titration. This is an experiment that you have to learn for your practical class as well. So this is part of theory as well as practical. And one specific feature of this experiment is that it employs two indicators, phenolphthalein and methyl orange. So what I want is, I want you to go throughout the complete procedure so that when we meet next time and I will be discussing it, it will be easier for you to understand things. Is that clear? So I want you to go through this complete procedure. Now, any other question that you have in your mind in today's class that you want to ask?
Ma'am,
Yes.
can you show that previous slide? The combination.
You want me to show you the previous slide?
Yes, the
Just
combination.
wait, just wait. Yes, slide number 15.
Ma'am, in those last two reactions, what were you trying to say? I mean, were the combination not possible or the reaction is not feasible?
The reaction is feasible, the reaction takes place. And the combination actually, it's not about the possibility, it's about the practical visibility. It's about that if hydroxide and bicarbonate, they will be present in any sample of water, this reaction will take place. And because of this, you will only observe carbonate ions. So there will be no such thing. That means where the combination of hydroxide and bicarbonate will be present. This combination you will never observe in any sample of water. This is what I'm trying to say.
So
Because
the reaction will be completely forward.
yeah, it will be completely
Okay, ma'am.
forward. What do you mean by that? Is the
That means a
reversible
reverse
part
reaction
continuous?
doesn't.
Yeah, obviously. These are ionic reactions, and most of the time they're more than 99% in the forward direction. Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Another point could have been raised. You people have not raised that point, but you are coming across something like you have reversibility in your mind. I had something else. I was of the view that what if the concentration of both the ions is not same? Then what will be the condition? Can you think of that possibility? Because we have talked about the ideal condition, that both the ions are present in equal concentration. Then this will happen. But if they are not of equal concentration, which can be the case, then what in that case? See, we have eliminated that, or we have skipped that part, because already the concentration of these ions is really small in water. So after reaction, even if some ion is left, either of the two, it will be too small to be taken into consideration. And that is why we have skipped that possibility. Are you following what I'm trying to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If not, then you can leave the discussion. It is of no relevance. Any other question?
No, ma'am.
If no, then I allow you to leave the class.
Ma'am, can you upload it in file
I
section?
will upload it definitely. I will upload it during the weekend. Probably on Saturday, I will upload it in all the classes.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, 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 ma'am.